The Legend of the Northern Blade. Chapter 4. Against the Wind 3. Young master, cried the man, whose name was Huang Kiel I. Huang Kiel had once been a third-rate soldier in the Northern Army. He was never any good at martial arts, but his loyalty was unquestionable. He was also the only soldier who hadn't truly abandoned the Northern Army. He voluntarily chose to spend the hard-earned money he got from working elsewhere on food and necessities for Jinmu I, and would deliver them in person regularly. His devotion earned him the honor of being called Uncle by Jinmu I, too. Young master, how have you been lately? Have the new mercenaries been treating you well? Don't worry, Uncle Huang, they haven't harmed me. How have you been? I'm doing well, thank you. Huang Kiel looked at Jinmu I sadly. He was also an orphan. When he was young, he used to always get falsely accused of crimes. So he ended up wandering from place to place. That ended when he met Jinmu I's father, Jin Quan Ho. Not only was Jin Quan Ho the first person to accept him, he took him in, taught him martial arts, and gave him the ability to make a living. Huang Kiel never had any talent in martial arts. He couldn't even master the basics of the Northern Army's martial arts. Despite that, Jin Quan Ho personally taught him self-defense, so that he could protect himself and live independently. Of course, he could never compare to the elites. His lack of talent was just too large of a barrier, but he was still good enough at martial arts that people called it a miracle. Huang Kiel never forgot Jin Quan Ho's kindness. While everyone else abandoned the Northern Army, he chose to serve Jinmu I instead. Have you had dinner yet? Huang Kiel opened his backpack. A few moments later, a bowl of freshly cooked rice with steamy side dishes appeared in front of Jinmu I. Huang Kiel had probably just finished cooking. The weather is cold today, so please eat while the food is hot, young master. Uncle Huang, you don't have to do this for me. I can cook for myself. No, young master, I enjoy cooking for you. Hurry and eat. Jinmu I found himself unable to reject Huang Kiel's sincerity, so he grabbed a spoon. He suggested sharing the food with Huang Kiel, but was refused. Huang Kiel said that he would feel full just watching Jinmu I eat. Jinmu I felt a little choked from gratitude, but still went ahead and swallowed his food. Huang Kiel was always like this. Xiao Mu Sang twitched. He had watched this entire scene unfold from his hiding spot, and was starting to feel guilty for spying on the touching reunion between a young heir of fallen nobility and his loyal servant. The greedy Jiang Pai San now seemed so petty compared to these two sincere people. After Jinmu I finished his dinner, Huang Kiel went to rest in the mansion, while Jinmu I headed to the Grand Library to kill time. Since Jinmu I wasn't in his room, Xiao Musang went to search through all of his books, but didn't find anything of interest. Was this really the headquarters of the Northern Army? The great Northern Army that single-handedly stopped the Silent Knight's invasion? Once, it had been every young man's dream to serve the Northern Army. The Northern Army had been like a utopia to those who dreamed of becoming a hero, including Xiao Musang. However, the higher one's hopes were, the more disappointed one would feel when those hopes were dashed. Disappointment would then turn into chagrin, and chagrin into hatred. The light of guilt vanished from Xiao Musang's eyes as he recalled his hatred for Jinmu I. Jinmu I opened the door to his room and entered. Anger flashed across his eyes for a moment as he looked across the room. Generally, it appeared the same as when he had left. However, He noticed that the placement of some objects had shifted just a little bit. "A guest was here," muttered Jinmu-1, as if it didn't matter to him. It was like this 2 years ago, too. Captain Seo and his men would search his room again and again whenever he went out. Only after conducting more than a dozen searches did they finally give up and conclude that there was nothing of value hidden in his room. They all thought that Jinmu-1 hadn't noticed, but they had severely underestimated him. Jinmu-1's observational skills and sharp eyesight were unparalleled. He could detect even the most subtle of changes. "I wonder how many times you guys are going to search my room this time," said Jinmu-1 to himself. He sat down at his desk and looked at the few books placed atop it, including the Tao Te Ching 3. He could tell that the books had been opened by another, even though there were very few clues. T-esque. Jinmu-1 clicked his tongue and put the books back in their original position. Later that night, when everyone else had fallen asleep, Jinmu-1 opened the window and looked outside. His room was on the 3rd floor of the mansion, so he could see the entirety of the Northern Army fortress from his window. The days long gone were like a pleasant dream. Back then, many warriors would drink, discuss martial arts, or train late into the night. Things were lively. Now there was only silence. Jinmu-1 stood unmoving, looking at the scenery outside. He was like a statue, making not the slightest movement. After about an hour, he shut the window and lay on his bed. He rolled around on it for a while, then began to breathe regularly as if he had fallen into a deep sleep. Swoosh. A long time after Jinmu-1 had fallen asleep, a barely perceptible swoosh sound could be heard. Jinmu-1 waited for a few minutes, then opened his eyes. "You finally left, huh?" Jinmu-1 knew that someone had been tailing him for the last few days. He even knew that he had been spied on exactly 12 times a day, his every action monitored. At first, he could feel that the spy had been pretty focused, but that concentration had waned as time passed. Jinmu-1 led a very regular lifestyle. Every morning, he would take a walk. After that, he would head to the Grand Library and read. In the evening, he would take another walk before retiring to his room. The only change today was that he had breakfast together with Huang Qil. This unchanging routine made his life extremely boring. Such a routine was the result of his determination to survive. But at the same time, it was also an unbearably painful experience for both the one following it and the one observing it. Naturally, this held true for Seo Mu-sang as well, as he gradually lost interest in Jinmu-1. Instead of tailing him all the time, Seo Mu-sang would only pay attention if Jinmu-1 did something unusual. Jinmu-1 once again confirmed that his tail was gone before picking up the Tao Te Ching that currently lay beside his bed. This was the book that he would read whenever he was alone. The Tao is ever inactive, yet there is nothing it does not do. For this was Jinmu-1's favorite line in the Tao Te Ching, and also the line that best represented its contents. He sat on his bed and read the Tao Te Ching over and over again. The night was passing, and dawn would soon arrive in the north. Occasionally, Jinmu-1 would go outside the Northern Army fortress. The instant he stepped out of the entrance, he was hit by the freezing, biting wind. The wind engulfed him brutally, and before he knew it, his clothes were a mess. This wasn't a normal gale. It was a violent windstorm that felt like it could rip a person's body to pieces. The northern winds were never benevolent, so even those who had lived here for a long time would avoid going outdoors on a windy day. Jinmu-1 frowned, but did not turn back. The wind was so strong that it was hard even to breathe. Jinmu-1 let himself be assailed by the raging tempest until he began to feel pain. Pain is good. Pain is proof that I'm still alive. When the Northern Army was disbanded, time stopped for Jinmu One. To put it precisely, he stopped feeling the passing of time, because time spent living a life without meaning might as well not have passed at all. For Jinmu One who lived like that, the bone-chilling pain from the frigid wind was an alarm that jolted him awake from a dreary lull. It let him know that he was still alive. Jinmu One took a step forward. There were no settlements within 10 miles of the Northern Army fortress. In the past, the fortress had been surrounded by villages big and small. However, after the fall of the Northern Army and the departure of the villagers, all traces of their existence had been wiped out by the merciless windstorms. All he saw now was a place frozen in time and the ruins of a once great fortress. Jinmu One himself was a part of that bleak scene, like a still frame from an old movie. The way you are now, Jinmu One, is just pitiful, said Jinmu One to himself. He climbed to the top of a nearby hill, where one could get a view of the entire fortress. The top of this hill was also the highest point in the mostly flat northern region, and the place where he could see the furthest away. Jinmu One gazed out at a place beyond the horizon, the southern region, the place everyone called the Central Plains. He had never gone there before. Standing under a tree, Jinmu One looked toward the south for a very long time. If one looked at him now, they would see the flat northern plains reflected in his eyes. Whoosh! Jinmu One was knocked over by a particularly powerful gale. He was simply too weak. Well, I'm still young. In time, I will grow taller and stronger. If I manage to survive till adulthood, that is. Ha! Sighed Jinmu One. Even thought it had only been for a moment. A look of determination had appeared on his face. Not that he wasn't usually determined. He just needed to reinforce that determination every once in a while. That was because, if he wavered, it would be equivalent to betraying his father's memory. Soon, it would finally be time for him to take the next step forward. Swish! Suddenly, he heard the sound of clothes brushing against leaves as a hand holding. A black cloth reached out from behind him. Emph! Jinmu One's eyes widened as the hand pressed the cloth over his mouth. He began to feel faint. Hurry up! As Jinmu One's consciousness faded away, he heard a man's impatient roar. Footnotes. One Huang Kiel. The name Kiel means wisdom. 2. The social hierarchy in ancient China was strict, and a noble like Jinmu, when calling a mere servant uncle, was unthinkable. 3. Dao Di Jing, a Chinese classic text. 4. The Tao is ever inactive, yet there is nothing it does not do. The first line of chapter 37 of the Tao Di Jing, it means that while the Tao never takes direct action and goes with the flow of nature, it resides within the actions of everything. Here we come to the end of this chapter for today. Do not forget to follow our page on Facebook, or subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and like the video and leave your comment, and we will meet you in a new chapter.